Yes.
You guys look great on camera. That makes you feel
Okay, well, that's good.
Hey, let's go with it. I like it.
Okay.
Done deal. Anytime I hear I look great, I'm rolling with it because it doesn't happen much.
Okay.
Hey guys, here we are for our weekly podcast. I was just thinking about this. This actually came into existence because of COVID-19, but now it's allowing us to deal with issues beyond COVID-19. And, you know, the issue that we need to and want to talk about today is the issue of race and what that means in America, the discrimination that happens in America, and what do we do as a church? This is the things that I've been wrestling with of, you know, how do we respond? What's the best way to respond? What would Jesus want us to do? What would he do? So I'm really glad to have each of you guys here. I would love to hear some of your thoughts as far as this goes.
The fact that you are the lead pastor of NewLife City Church, an evangelical community, and you're asking about the role of the church, that in itself is significant. If you were to go back in time to, let's say, the 60s, it was fascinating to me during the 60s, that during the civil rights movement, the evangelical community was not asking that question. They were at best silent. At worst, they were advocating segregation. The evangelical Christian church. No question. I have a sermon transcript of one of the leading evangelical pastors in the nation, one of the leading, preaching about segregation and the rightness of it. Actually, literally says, white pastor, and he actually said, black people don't want to integrate. I'm thinking, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And he literally said it in his sermon. But he was voicing an attitude that was quite prevalent during that time. So here we are now, 2020, June, and you're stating that the church must have something to say about the race relations. And what is that statement? We've come a long way, baby. A long way. Jordan, it may be hard for you to believe, but I got saved in 1964. That's a few minutes before you were conceived.
That's right.
64. And I remember the attitudes. I remember the comments. I remember the positions that the evangelical church took in California, let alone the South. Let alone the South. So this is fascinating to me.
Can I ask you a question? I want to ask Jordan for sure a question too, but
As long as it's not about my age.
You already told us your age.
That's true.
So,
well, I pre-existed. See.
Okay. So, as a pastor, as somebody who has followed Jesus for a long time, I mean, do you have personal situations where you have felt racism?
By all means. By all means.
Would you be willing to share some of that?
Sure. You want children, adolescent, post-adolescence? What period of time would you like?
Man,
I got them.
What comes to mind? I remember a story you told me when you were living in Oakland, and one of your best friend's dad was a police officer.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is a significant story, even though the event took place when I was in the third grade, and so I'm quite young in the third grade. The reason why the event is significant is because you have to fast forward over 40-some-odd years. I'm talking to a group of teenage boys about that event. I am approaching 50 years of age. I'm talking about it, and I begin to choke up. And I began to realize how that event impacted me. I didn't understand it. I really didn't understand it. The event was this. My buddy's name was Clevey. That's what I called him. We're both in the third grade. We walk home from school every day, and we drop off his book bag and some other stuff. He'd go in the house, change clothes, and then come out, and then we head to my house so we could play. For the first time in doing that, day in, day out, first time, he says to me, "Hey, Don, come on into the house." And so I go in the house for the first time in my life. I never thought about going into his house. Didn't need to go into his house. No big deal. And I'm looking out the window, and all of a sudden a motorcycle cop pulls up and parks his bike. He's driving a Harley. And this dude, the third grader, he looked so cool. I mean, he had his helmet on, he had sunglasses on, he had the boots on and everything, and he was riding a Harley. I mean, this dude, I tell people all the time, he might as well have been Batman in the Batmobile. He was that cool. And he gets off his bike, walks in the house, and I'm saying to myself, Clevie was telling me the truth. His daddy was a cop, a motorcycle cop. I mean, I was ready to jump on my knees and bow to this guy. It was so fascinating. As a little third grader, the guy acknowledges, he doesn't speak, he just kind of nods his head at me and then walks into a room where Clevie was, and Clevie comes running out a moment later and says, we got to go. And so we get going, and Clevie says to me as we're walking towards my house, you can't come into my house anymore. Well, why not? And he says to me, my dad doesn't want colored people in the house. Now, don't forget, that was my first time in the house. I didn't ask to go into his house. It never dawned on me that it was something to be desired. And so he's telling me my dad doesn't want colored people in the house. I'm trying to process that as we're walking towards my house. Clevie and I have been buddies for a long time. But here again, we're just third graders. And I thought about it. And then life went on. Fast forward 40 some odd years later. I'm approaching 50 years of age. I'm running a home for teenage delinquent boys. And all my guys are, they were carjackers, and they were, some of them packed, you name it, and they had all gone through the juvenile justice system. They landed in this residential facility program, teenage boys, and we're a private organization, we're Christian. And so I'm giving a pep talk. I got about 30 guys in front of me, and my whole theme was that don't allow anyone to define you but God. No matter what, you do not allow anyone to define you but God. And I used the situation with Clevie as an example. And I'm thinking about what happened to me as I'm talking, and I begin to get choked up to my surprise. It shocked me. And this is what happened. As I'm talking, I'm saying, if Clevie's dad had said, I don't want Dad in his house because he was dirtying up the sofa, I would have taken a bath and washed my clothes. For that cop, that dude that was so fascinating, if he said, I smelled bad, I would have taken a bath. If he had said I was misbehaving, I would have stopped my behavior. He could have said a number of things, but what the Clevie said to me was that my dad does not want you in the house because he doesn't want colored people in the house. And in essence, Clevie was saying, this very cool, amazing individual thinks there's something wrong with the essence of who and what you are. And I started getting choked up as I'm telling these guys, because it's dawning on me in a way I had not considered. There was something wrong with me based upon this dude who was the epitome of being cool. And that was fascinating. The whole experience was fascinating to me.
Wow.
How we can impact children. We wonder, why do people act the way they do? Why are people angry when they get into their teen years and beyond? Why do people steal? Why do people do this? All the aberrant behaviors we can list. We need to look back at what we're doing to these people when they're children. We need to look back at what we're saying to them. And I can't blame Clevie's dad, because Clevie's dad didn't say that to me. In an indirect way, he did. But it was fascinating. I have story after story after story of how I was some way, somehow impacted by white Americans, and in particularly white Christians. I'm not saying Clevie's dad was a Christian, but because I grew up in the church, white Christians impacted me, said things to me, where I thought the church would be a refuge. It became, and sometimes it was actually a dangerous place for me. It really was. Because I grew up in, for the most part, in integrated churches. and people felt comfortable for whatever reason saying things about what they believed, what they understood. Yeah.
Wow. That story, when I first heard it several months ago, impacted me because I have a third grade son.
Yeah.
And he is African American.
Yeah.
And I have heard a few things, nothing like, well, I have heard several racist remarks about him, and that's significant.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll have time for you to share another one. I remember when you were, I think, at a dating age, there was one. But Jordan, I know you and I have had some conversations too, and even about growing up as a young guy and some of the things said to you growing up. And I don't know if you're comfortable sharing any of that or not, but.
Yeah. For me, it was interesting, though, because, when you're growing up biracial, it's just like a constant tug of war of how you're supposed to identify and feeling like one side's constantly claiming your identity when you're just trying to just be you and trying to navigate what that even means. I've had two pretty significant racial things that happened in my life. I remember walking home from school, probably 12 years old, and wasn't walking fast enough, I guess, across the crosswalk. And I mean, it's one of those moments that of course you'll never forget, especially because for me it didn't happen much. But I'll just never forget the dude, man, just like driving by in his tiny little Toyota or whatever it was, and just looks out his window and he's just like, "Get out the way, you N-word." And I was like, oh God, what? Because then in that moment, I'm sitting there like, I'm by myself, I'm 12, I'm walking home. I have no one to talk to about this. And I literally just got racially profiled and slandered.
And assaulted. And had no idea what for. You know what I'm saying? And that, like, one moment, though, and I think the biggest struggle for me was always because I was always wrestling back and forth. And, growing up, and I was telling a dude this yesterday, it was one of the most unfortunate things for me to not have, like, out of all the black men that came in and out of my life, like no one was there to represent what and who they're supposed to be. Just a father, a consistent person. I remember I struggled really, really hard with that, even becoming a believer, that I didn't have a different story. And so when I became older, and I was the black and white kid that looked Hispanic, though, No, I'm serious. Getting in real arguments with people who were like, "You're Hispanic," especially when I was younger with curly hair, like I don't hold strong black facial features. And so for me, I tried to just play that off as what it was. I was like, well, if you want me to be white and you want me to be black, I think I'll just be Hispanic then. And I'll just roll with it. I was all over the place, dude. Massive struggles. So things beyond, it would take up a lot of time on here. But that's another dynamic that I think I've been having the privilege of being able to share a lot with people who are biracial because, I think black folks are struggling with different dynamics. I think white people are too. But there really is like another group of people who are really trying to navigate a lot of things. And it's biracial people who have grown up with all kinds of different dynamics, and it opens up a lot of question and confusion, and then you add being a Christian to that, and then you're trying to just like really figure out how you're supposed to respond and what responsibility you have. So for me, if I were to get like assaulted for someone saying, well, you're a colored person or you're black or you're whatever, for me, I felt like I could just try to mask myself and not be that. Not because I didn't want to be black, but if someone was going to hate me because I was black, then I'll just be something else. Because I can if I try hard enough. I can look however I want to and try to just get away with it. That's weird, but that's what I went through. You know what I mean? Those are the identity issues and struggles of growing up and like trying to just like mask how I can identify. Wow.
So it's intense.
It's fascinating how we as a society force people to be so race conscious, color conscious. It's fascinating that we can't just let you be who you are.
Right. Yeah, because and it had nothing to do with not wanting to be black. But I was around, when I was around a lot of black people, it's like, oh, you're just a light skin. You're just light skin.
Yeah.
You're just a high yellow. You're just a light skinned brother. It's like, Okay, but I mean,
That's
like,
cool.
legitimately, though, I'm just as much white, though. So I'm not saying I don't want to be black, but I'm
Yeah.
white, too.
Yeah.
But I don't look like it, but I am.
Yeah.
You know, like, constantly going back and forth, trying to argue and defend something. I'm like, I'm just trying to be myself.
Trying to be me.
Just trying to be me. But, you know, and then I had a mom that was white who tried really hard to make sure that we knew we were black. You know, so it's just nativity scene was black, Santa was black, Jesus was black, Angel was black, everything was black. So I honor her for it because I know what her heart was.
Sure.
She didn't try to make us be raised in like a colorblind kind of dynamic. So I appreciate her for that. But still, it's just a lot. So there was our own, like my own tension of just trying to navigate my own turmoil on the inside when it came to black and white versus what was even going on in society or culture or how people perceived me or black folks. So
Wow.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you guys for sharing stories because that's helpful for me. It's been helpful for me to hear stories, real stories of things that have happened to you. I'm sorry they have. I hope I'm not guilty of, being discriminatory in any way. Also, my heart goes out because these are stories that happen when you're children.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate these things? And I think as a church, we need to at least lean in and listen in. And how many kids are there that are walking across sidewalks today that are getting stuff yelled at them that they don't have a dad to go to? And where are we as a church to go to them? Where's the call for us as men to say, okay, I'm going to step in and I'm going to at least be a mentor if God allows me to help somebody out and help them have a shoulder to lean on or, something there. And I know that's a passion of yours is fathering and yours too, Jordan. So I'm really thankful for the stories. My heart is leaning in to say, how can we build into fathering? How can we build into being, helpful individuals in these scenarios?
Something that's worth mentioning is that because of the racial tension that's a part of the American story, my experience is this. I never talked to a person of color for a period of time where race doesn't become a part of the discussion. When I say never, I truly mean that. I've actually thought about this. Whether they are socioeconomically poor or middle income, educationally uneducated, educated, whatever the case would be. I'm thinking of a friend of mine who is a retired brigadier general, and his name is Donald Scott. And Donald Scott's a black man, like I said, retired brigadier general from the Army. We met, he began to come to the church, and I was his pastor. And we would get together and we'd end up talking about race. It always comes up. It doesn't just 90% of the time, it always comes up. I can think of others in the middle or low achieving people, doesn't matter who they are. If they are black, we will talk about race. And the thing that's interesting is that as I've asked this question of white people, do you talk about race when you guys get together? And inevitably, they will say, no. I mean, race may come up, and it may, but it may not. No, we don't talk about race. Well, every time I get together with a black person, give it 30 minutes, the subject of race comes out. What's going on with the race dynamic? For example, I met Donald Scott. I was the pastor of the church, and he was Googling, looking for a church. He just moved to the area, and he saw that this church that I was pastoring was integrated, and the pastor was black. That was me, and he lived in North Kansas City. He decided to check it out. He and his wife came, checked it out, and they drove every Sunday there. Because that was so meaningful to them. And then he came to the Thursday morning 6:30 prayer group, if you could imagine. Getting there at 6:30 in the morning, driving from North Kansas City. He just wanted to be a part of something that was healthy, that at least had the appearance of being healthy. But I got together with him, and we began to talk. It had to do with race. I mean, I was hoping he was getting fed from my teaching, I hope. But what at least initially got his attention was race. And then he would talk about his journey as a general in the Army concerning race. And so I think that is important to understand that as we navigate as Christians, whoever we are, whoever's looking at this podcast, there is a distinct difference. From my standpoint, white people don't see race the way black people do. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just different. Mm-hmm. It's different. It's a very distinct part of the narrative of the journey of Black America.
Yeah, I've been silent because I'm wrestling, I'm learning, I'm listening to you guys, because I look at you, Don. It's like you're a pastor, you're a mentor. I would go to you for anything. It doesn't matter. And Jordan, you're just a brother. I'd come and sit down and have you. It just doesn't matter. And so that comment that you made is very important, because I don't know what to do with it, because I've never experienced it. My experience, and I hope this doesn't come off wrong, my experience is watching Remember the Titans and being super offended that even happened back then. And yet it's still happening now. And so now where is my offense that's taking place? So that's what I'm wrestling with. So that's why I appreciate you guys' stories. And one of the things I'm challenged with is how to, as we wrestle with this issue, and we wrestle with it as the church, because we could just do it as a social issue, and then it's just this big thing out there that, okay, we've got to have justice and make it right. There's some importance to that, but it's still a spiritual issue. Are we going to see, Jordan, your story was so important, and the words you were saying, Don, are we going to see the value that Jesus placed on each person, no matter what? We were talking about John 4 earlier today, and the Samaritans, and how they were half-breeds of the biblical day. And are we going to see people like Jesus did as that person's valuable? I don't care if it's a woman, a Samaritan, divorced 5 times, living with your boyfriend now. I don't care what it is. You're valuable and you're loved.
Yeah.
Now, how do I love that person, no matter whether it's that situation or my black brothers and sisters?
So you have Jesus, arguably the most important person that ever walked the face of the earth. And he was only going to be here for about 33 years. And he tells his disciples, I got business in Samaria. And what was the business as the story unfolds? He was going to talk to a woman, as you just said, who was a Samaritan, had been married and divorced 5 times, and was living with a boyfriend at the time she met Jesus. And that was his business in Samaria. That woman was that important. Wow. Wow, that's powerful.
Well, there's a lot more that I think that we could talk about, and maybe we'll take another podcast next time to do it. One of the things that I think God is speaking into me is, I would love to make a difference in the world, but I have an opportunity to make a difference in our church. Yeah. And we do. Yeah. And so I want to listen well to people in our church who are African American or other races, and I want to hear the pain, and I want to walk into it. I want to join you in it. I want to mourn with you in it. I'm here. I'm your brother, and so any way that I can be a part of that and learn, I'm here to learn and be humble in that posture. Yeah. And so I guess Galatians 6:10, just is what's pounding into my head, and it's like, do good to all people, especially those of the household of faith. And for me, maybe somebody else's call is to go outside, but my call right now is like, how can I lean into our body and our people, and how can we have a diverse group that all is unified around Jesus? So that's good. Yeah.
You just touched the distinctive. Do good to all people, period, especially to those who are of the household of faith. Those are the distinctives. All people, and especially those of the household of faith. That's it. That's it.
Wow.
I mean, that's a powerful statement if you think of it. That is it.
Yep. That's good.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I wish we could take more time, and we probably will next week. I think this is a subject we need to lean into even more. And so if you have questions or thoughts or ideas, if you want to lean in more, we have a group called Building Bridges that meets every other week and talks about this, listens to stories, even is going on field trips. And you can just get information just by emailing info@newlifekc.org, and we can get you info about our Building Bridges group. And so being a part of that would be awesome. But thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you.